Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the session on empowering survivors, building resilience, addressing gender-based violence and disaster risk management. So thank you for joining us. So this session is jointly organized by the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery and JICA and the World Bank's Gender Group as well. So just to mention, I think we're all aware, but in the wake of disasters, women and girls often face amplified challenges, including income loss, mobility that's limited, and difficulty in accessing essential services like healthcare and sanitation. And so we'll talk about a few of these challenges, as well as how the impacts of disasters and understanding them is one of the first steps to help create a more inclusive approach to disaster risk management. And we're also going to, of course, discuss effective strategies for preventing and mitigating gender-based violence during emergencies. So let's get started. I know it's a busy week, right? And everybody has so many sessions and things going on. So what we wanted to do, Oh, sorry, I was trying to go to the next slide. Okay, so I'll tell you what we are going to do, and I can put up the slide, is we're going to do a little bit of a word cloud exercise, just to get a feel for what you think and your understanding about gender-based violence and emergencies. So what we're going to do in 1 second is put up the QR code, and what you can do is scan it with your phone and put in whatever word comes to mind according to this question. So the question is, what strategies do you think would be effective to prevent gender-based violence during emergencies? So, 1 second. Nope. Sorry? Oh, I think it's not up quite yet. Just give us 1 second. The what? Click again? I'm not clicking. Okay. Thanks for your patience, guys. Okay. If it's not working, we can go do that at the end. So the next thing that we wanted to do to make it a little bit also more interactive before we move to the panel discussion is we're going to watch a brief video. So it's called Addressing Violence Against Women and Girls in Global Development, and it links to how the importance of responding before and after disasters occur. So if we can pull up, let's see if our tech works this time. If not, we'll go straight to the panel discussion. Okay. So here we are. This is our session. Oh, me. See, now it's me. Okay. Oh. Should I continue? Okay, so here's our video. So we'll just go straight to the video.
We want you to join us in ending an epidemic that affects more than 1 in 3 women in every country and community you work in. It's violence against women and girls, usually at the hands of husbands or boyfriends, or sexual violence carried out by a non-partner. It has devastating consequences for the health, education, well-being, and opportunities of those who experience it. All too often, it costs victims their lives. The negative consequences do not stop there. Violence against women and girls also affects women's ability to contribute to their nation's economic growth. But the evidence shows us that violence is preventable. You have the opportunity to make a difference. Use the Violence Against Women and Girls Resource Guide, which provides information on how to initiate innovative projects that can help end the cycle of abuse. Projects that make sure women and girls can travel safely to school and work. Train teachers and health workers to identify risks and warning signs. And map essential service providers to create a response when the risk of violence arises can all make a difference. Integrating violence prevention and response into World Bank projects allows women and girls to fully participate in society, positively impacting their communities, not just for their generation, but for every generation to come. So don't be the missing link in the chain. Join us and let's end this global epidemic together.
Great. So with that, I'm going to introduce now our colleague Diana Rango, who is a senior gender specialist at the World Bank, to take over, introduce the panel, and get things moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe, so much, and thank you all for being here. Oh, the clicker. Okay, so why are we here? We're here because there's now really robust evidence that shows that violence against women and girls, or gender-based violence, increases in the aftermath of a disaster. We have longitudinal data from Hurricane Katrina that shows that after Hurricane Katrina, levels of intimate partner violence increased. And those levels and that increase was retained 10 years after the hurricane, right? So this doesn't just happen in the aftermath of a crisis, it happens well into recovery. So that means that we have to plan to address gender-based violence from the beginning, from our preparedness plans all the way into our immediate response into long-term recovery plans, right? And why does gender-based violence increase? We also have longitudinal evidence from other hurricanes like Typhoon Haiyan and other places in the world. So this is a fact. It's happening everywhere. And another fact is that violence against women and girls is happening in communities before a disaster occurs. It will happen and increase during the disaster, and it will remain in the aftermath of a disaster. It's really a pandemic. But what happens is certain risk factors are increased in disasters, such as economic insecurity, financial stress, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all risk factors that go along with violence against women in the first place. There's also something that happens uniquely in a disaster, and it's a deep power imbalance between those that come and provide aid and the community that needs the resources and the aid. And unfortunately, more than I would like to accept, those unbalanced power relationships are used for sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. And so also what happens is in the aftermath of a recovery, what we're trying to do, our shelters, our infrastructures, getting people into places that are safe, are often not designed thinking of the specific risks that women might have in being part of those shelters, right? In the safe spaces that they might need. Are we creating spaces that keep them away from perpetrators in that shelter? Can we provide women privacy, women safe spaces where they're only there by themselves and potentially away from harm? So that's why we're here. We're here because there are several things that can be done. There's several things that can be done in preparedness, and I'm giving you an example here of a few, but the GDFRR has allowed us to update a resource guide and a brief with many different options for all of you to consider when planning for disasters. We like to work on violence against women and girls at 3 levels. At the policy level, the macro level, at the institutional level, and always with communities. So at the policy level, an example of what we can do in preparedness is making sure that our frameworks and our policies recognize that violence against women will increase and that we will need staff and we will need investment to address that in the aftermath of a crisis. At the community level and at the institutional level, we can create shelters that provide those safe spaces, that address some of those risks for women and girls. And at the community level, like we heard from the youth yesterday, we can integrate into our awareness raising and our communication campaigns about disasters that violence will not be tolerated in the aftermath of a disaster, and that our response activities have thought about protecting women, and that resources will be available for women and girls in particular, although men and boys can also experience violence against women. And what happens after the emergency occurs? We really need to make sure that those policies and those protocols that we've been working on before the disaster are implemented, and that we're coordinating in an effective way. And I think one of the most important things of coordination is recognizing that before the crisis, there were institutions, community-based organizations that were supporting survivors of violence. So we have to integrate them into our coordination mechanisms in the aftermath of a disaster. At the institutional level, we can really make sure that we're monitoring that the shelters that we're creating, for example, have separate spaces for women, that the latrines have locks, that the water points are in well-lit places that might not increase danger and risk for women and girls to experience violence. And at the community level, it's really to use them as a resource to check in, to see where they're seeing risks, to see where they're seeing those power imbalances that might be exploited for sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. So it's really to help us monitor our actions using the voices of community members. We've used innovative approaches like photo voice, where community members take pictures of unsafe places that give us immediate data that can help us make places safer for women. So I'm gonna stop talking. There's more ideas in the resource brief that Zoe will present at the end. You'll all be able to download it on a QR code. But my main message is that we can do something both in preparedness and response. There's several ideas that we can integrate, and we can integrate these one at a time that will really have an impact on violence against women and girls. But now the most exciting part is the panel. And we have actually people that will tell us how they're doing this work on the ground, instead of the ideas that I just presented as just ideas. So I'm happy to call to the stage our panelists, our distinguished panelists. First, Misa Machimura, Program Officer, the Office of Gender, Equality, and Poverty Reduction, Governance, and Peace Building in the Department Peace Building Department and the Japan International Cooperation Agency. JICA, please join us on the stage. And we have Mayor of Palu, Hadianto Rasid of Central Sulawesi. Please join us on the stage. And Gail Drakes of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDIMA. And so it's my pleasure to be able to ask you some questions. I'll come join you on the stage. I'll sit here with you. Sure. And Misa, can I call you Misa? Machimura. JICA is internationally known as a champion of gender equality. Really, all the efforts that you do are recognized globally. And I would want you to maybe tell us a little bit more how you integrate gender equality perspectives into disaster risk management programs and your capacity building efforts.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the World Bank and JFDLL for the opportunity to participate in this session. I'm very thrilled to be here with the panelists who work on this critical issue all around the world. So for this question, I will provide a quick overview of JICA's policy on gender equality and women's empowerment, followed by 2 examples from our work. So JICA has set its global agenda as JICA's cooperation strategy for global issues. And one of the areas of 20 global agendas is gender equality and women's empowerment. So among various efforts to promote gender equality and women's empowerment, The promotion of gender-smart business and the elimination of sexual and gender-based violence are set as clusters, which are the areas in which development cooperation is strengthened and implemented in cooperation with other development agencies, NGOs, and the private sectors. And these two clusters are critical for the disaster risk reduction and recovery as well, because women face disproportionate impact on their safety and economic security after the disaster. So under those policies, we have been working to integrate gender and diversity perspectives to DLL and recovery efforts. And one of the successful program is the Knowledge Co-Creation Program, Gender and Diversity in Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Change. So it is a capacity development program held once a year in Japan, aiming for mutual learning between developing countries and Japan on gender responsive DLL. So each country is supposed to nominate the government officials who work in DLL sector, gender sector, and representatives from civil society organization respectively. So since 2015 to date, so 107 trainees, including 73 women from 24 countries have participated. So participants are mainly from Asia Pacific region and Central and South America. So through 3-week program, participants understand the roles and functions of government and local community in DLL and climate change adaptation by the lectures and discussions with central and local government officials, as well as women's group who are working on these issues in Japan. So participants also visit Tohoku region, which was affected by the Great East earthquake in 2011, to learn efforts and good practices on DLL and climate change adaptation, including promotion of women's leadership. So finally, participants develop their own action plans, which is the culmination of the training, promotes comprehensive and sustainable activities upon return to the country through collaboration among disaster management related department and gender related department and civil society organization in the country. So after going back to their countries, some participants, for example in Mexico, are contributing to JICA's technical cooperation project on DLL by applying what they learned from the program. And in terms of the disaster response program incorporating gender perspectives, I'd like to introduce one recent example in Turkey. So the project for psychosocial support and disaster resilience for youth is currently under formulation with the government of Turkey. And during the data collection survey phase, personnel from Gender Equality Office of JICA, which is myself, was dispatched, and the information on gendered experience and challenges faced by women, girls, men, and boys were collected. And women and girls were facing the heightened risks of violence, and access to services were sometimes limited for the most vulnerable populations, such as girls in refugee communities. While men and boys were often unable to receive psychosocial support due to gender norms. So those findings are taken into account throughout the project planning phase, and mobile outreach activities will be included in the project to improve service accessibility, including psychosocial support. Furthermore, the methods for boosting referral systems and prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse and harassment at youth center are now being discussed. So such initiatives to incorporate gender and GBV perspectives into disaster response program have been previously adopted by JICA, and we will continue to do so in the future as well. Thank you.
That's amazing. I'm such a big fan of that work. And not only that you integrate it in your own programs, but that you're building the capacity of government actors to really have an intentional action plan that hopefully is resourced to address gender inequality in disaster risk management. So thank you so much for sharing that. Mayor Rashid, let me continue with you.
Yes.
You have experience responding to several natural disasters. How is the Central Sulawesi Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Project how is it integrating the specific needs of women and girls?
Okay, thank you. Before I answer the question, uh, first of all, I want to say thanks to the World Bank to give a precious time for me to be able attending this forum and to share how my city faced the disaster in 2018. But before that, I want to give you a little describing about my city. I'm living in Palu City. I'm as a mayor there. Palu City was located in Indonesia, specifically in Central Sulawesi province. In 2018, we faced a terrible disaster, the earthquake, with a power of around 7.4 scale of Richter. And it not just the earthquake, because it follow with the tsunami, follow with the liquefaction. Liquefaction is such a land that sank the two big district, sub-district over my city. One of sub-district that's around 186 hectare, and one again is around 60 hectare. That's sank by the land. And of course, because of that, so many victims, many houses affected. Yeah, such a heavy damage, medium and light damage. But of course, our government try to do the best we can how to face the situation by build a tent, something like that. If you say that, a shelter. And of course, aftermath, we faced what we call a gender-based violation. We found about 12 cases about that, and finally we realized that the victims in this in this such a condition, sure, gonna be what is it? Gonna hit women and children, and because of that, with a collaboration with the World Bank and with the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, we try to find to identify how we solve this problem. So what we do for that, we make a group of community that's close to women and children, and how we strengthen them with education, and how to put this agenda in a policy of the government. And World Bank and the government of Central Sulawesi, including me as a mayor of Palu, really committed to this, how to prevent our women and our children that's get in a worse situation with the gender-based violation. So probably that's I can tell you as the highlight. Thank you.
That's great. I mean, and that shows kind of intentional work that you have to do, an intentional investment in time and kind of planning to address that violence. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now I'll turn to Ms. Gail Drakes on a question about how the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency is helping countries in the Caribbean that are regularly impacted by disasters to support women and girls in disaster situations. And I wanted to ask you about what are the obstacles that you're seeing when you're doing this work in the Caribbean?
Okay, thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the World Bank for giving us this opportunity to come here and just discuss this topic a little bit. It's one of the critical issues I think we've been looking at a lot more over the last few years, simply because of some of the major disasters that we've had in the region. I should probably explain that SEDIMA is an organization that comprises 19 participating states. They're sovereign states in the Caribbean. And I work at the coordinating unit. So our role really is to support the member states in being able to implement very strong programs for disaster risk management. And what we have looked at is specifically in terms of gender as a broad issue. We've worked to promote the institutionalization of gender mainstreaming, including concerns related to gender-based violence. And we try to start at the beginning, really, at that level of governance, of ensuring that there's a correct enabling environment, and in terms of your policies and your strategies for disaster risk management, both at the regional level. So the regional level, we have identified gender as a cross-cutting theme in our regional strategy for disaster risk management. And this translates now into the national level, where countries, when they develop their national strategies and programs for disaster risk management, a part of the process that we support them in, throughout the process, there are points where we ensure that we are working to mainstream gender and to integrate gender considerations. But once you've developed those programs and you have put those policies in place, it becomes the question of now, how do you practically do this? How do you practically really be able to mainstream gender considerations? And another way in which we support countries in through the collective nature of the SEDIMA system, collective cooperational nature of SEDIMA system, is to develop model policies and tools and guidelines and resources that countries can use and adapt at the national level. And throughout the process, for all of those tools and guidelines, we ensure that gender is considered, so that when they're going through the process of adapting these tools or these models, there is already built into the structure of these tools the considerations for gender. So for example, if I look at recent work, our policies on multi-hazard early warning systems, for example, which have been adopted by several of our countries, we've integrated gender considerations into that as one example. We don't simply look at preparedness and response. We also ensure that we're looking at how do we mitigate risk, and we also very recently we've done quite a bit more work at the stage of recovery. Not simply recovery after you've been impacted, but before you've been impacted. And this may be sometimes one of the obstacles, is understanding that you can plan for what you will be able to do after you have been impacted, long before you've actually been impacted. So our CDM audit, which is a means for a country to assess where they are in terms of mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. The recovery section of that, and this is through work that was done with the World Bank, actually. Yes, we enhanced that section of the audit, the recovery audit, and the part of that enhancement was to make that section sure it was more gender sensitive. And I would say also capacity building is another key way that we have been working with countries to build an awareness and an understanding of gender as a driver of risk, but also very specifically we've done quite recent work in terms of gender-based violence and helping people to understand why a victim of gender-based violence is in a position where their risk has been enhanced or the risk has been increased, and it is intersecting oftentimes with other drivers of vulnerability to make them, which means that as a grouping, you have to take into consideration, whether it's mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, you have to be taken into consideration from very early on how you're going to address issues related to gender-based violence and to make that group less at risk.
That's great, because it really does need integration in all those phases, right? Recognition, integration, investment. And I forgot to mention, but we have data from, I think, Hurricane Katrina that shows that 10 years after the hurricane, those women that were experiencing more intimate partner violence in the aftermath were still experiencing higher levels a decade later. So it's really important that everything that you said be taken into account. So wonderful that you're doing that in the Caribbean. Thank you for sharing. Misa, let me come back to you. So JICA's doing already so much, and you have capacity building that really is touching people and communities in different parts of the world. So what is your ambition? What is your next steps for this work moving forward?
Thank you. So I'd like to focus on 2 areas for JICA's next steps. So first, enhance efforts in gender-responsive DLL in accordance with JICA's Japan's National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security Agenda. And second is strengthen collaboration with other development partners on DLL and climate change from a gender and diversity perspective. So concerning the first point, Women, Peace and Security addresses the impact of conflict on women and the importance of women's full and equal participation in conflict resolution, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response, and post-conflict reconstruction. But because Japan is vulnerable to disasters, the National Action Plan also includes disaster response, which incorporate a gender perspective into humanitarian and recovery assistance. So in accordance with Japan's National Action Plan, JICA aims to improve its effort to encourage women's leadership in DLL project and capacity development initiatives. So since gender-responsive disaster risk reduction is a global issue, through the process, we mutually learn about gender-responsive DLL with other countries, and these insights have been applied back to Japan. So this exchange of experience will continue to improve DLL in our cooperation, so we'd like to strengthen that process. So regarding the second point, we would like to further collaborate with other development partners in this area. So different organization has different strengths and expertise and experience. So as we implement knowledge co-creation program, as I've introduced earlier, so we hope to have some inputs or lectures from other partners on specific topics, including GBV, would be greatly benefit the participants, we believe. So for example, already introduced that GFDLL and World Bank has specific materials on GBV in the disaster risk reduction and preparedness. So those kind of materials, if we could incorporate into our program, it would be great, we believe. So those kind of collaboration we would like to accelerate. So also co-hosting this technical session, technical workshop with World Bank is one example of such collaboration. So we want to continue our cooperation on an exchange of experience to advance gender responsive DLL. Thank you.
I think you can absolutely count on our continued collaboration, and I really look forward to it, and maybe taking the course myself. I really want to take it. Mayor Rashid, let me go back to you. So you told us that in the aftermath of a crisis, you heard of 12 cases of increased gender-based violence. And I was wondering, what in particular did that trigger for you to do to help support these women? How did you respond to those cases? What actions were you able to take to support these women and girls?
Yeah. After we knew there is we found 12 cases of gender-based violations in the shelter. What we've done is, of course, we make a group how to give education to them, and how to make the shelter more safer for women and the kids. And of course, as I said just now, but this is a really big issue for us. And after found the cases, and finally we make a priority about how to make the shelter more safer for women, the kids, and of course, after that, we try to enhance the knowledge of the about the violence and how to strengthen the woman to give them fully support for everything, and yeah, we try to what is it to give the best that we can give to the to our I mean I always say it, my people was my family. So that we do that for them, how to give them good protection, and how to give them a healing from the trauma about this violation. Uh, and thanks for the World Bank, yeah, for fully supported this thing, and yeah, and like Mr. Louis said to me about the what is it, the construction, construction, the rehabilitation and reconstruction in Central Sulawesi, especially in Palu, was the best infrastructure among infrastructure after disaster that undertaken by the World Bank. And the issue of the gender-based violation is the concerning of the rebuild infrastructure and rehab in Central Sulawesi, especially in Palu.
That's so great because it takes a survivor so much bravery
Yeah.
to come forward and
Yeah, right.
seek help.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you were able to support them in
Yeah,
such a
yeah,
robust
yeah. We
way,
gave that. We
it's-
gave that.
it's really
Because, yeah,
amazing.
That's what is the govern for.
That's great.
They have to be they have to be available for their people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it sends a message that it's not acceptable,
Yeah.
but that you will care for survivors.
You know, we never thought this disaster will be happen in Palu, in such huge disaster. So dealing with the victims, probably this is the first time. So learning from that we found the social problems such as the gender violence happen. So yeah, we are surprised with that, but we are learning from that we have to make a good policy and to make prevention more better if something such this condition will be happen in future. But we don't know. We don't hope that will be happen again.
Yeah, but now you have great lessons to apply if it
Yeah,
ever.
yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Okay, Gail, let me finish with you. One more question. Could you explain how SEDIMA collaborates with various organizations, government, UNDP, or UN, UNDP in particular, to address GBV and disasters, and any effective strategies that you're developing and sharing through that work with partners?
Okay, thank you. I think I would want to focus probably as an example of how we've been working with particularly UNDP and a number of other partners as well. I think I'd like to focus on some work we did recently with the UNDP to develop guidelines for the Caribbean on how to integrate considerations of violence against women and family violence into disaster risk management. And this guideline, I remember I said as earlier, it's a practical question of, well, we say we have to mainstream gender, but then how do we do this? And what this guideline was intended to do was to provide the user with very practical ways in which to actually be able to integrate considerations of gender-based violence into disaster risk management programs, yes, but also into, we look generally at the matter of the program or project management cycle. So it is a fairly broadly applicable and broadly a document that can be used by a number of different stakeholders, I think. And because it's specific to the Caribbean, it begins with, you asked me earlier about obstacles. So it begins with making the business case. So the business case for the matter of considering gender-based violence as you are developing plans and programs for disaster risk management. You might think you wouldn't have to make a case, but one of the considerations we have to take into account is that there are varying perceptions. Especially in the Caribbean, there are some interesting perceptions among men and women about the question of gender and whether there are gender considerations. I've been in training sessions and so on, where people have said to me, but why do we have to do this? We don't have gender issues. And I've had men sometimes say to me, the women are taking over. I don't know why we need to consider this. And that is an example of perception. So the guideline begins with making the business case. It gives, and it also makes it also goes on to explain so that the user begins to understand what is this intersection between gender-based violence and other forms of vulnerability, and what are the things you have to take into consideration. But the important part of it, I think the useful part of the guideline, are a series of practical checklists with questions and issues that are related now to strategies that you can take to integrate considerations of gender-based violence into your programs and plans. And they are aligned to the disaster cycle, which is mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, but it's also aligned to the various stages of the program or project development cycle. So that we're looking not just at maybe developing the overarching programming, but also when you're now coming to actually implement activities. At that stage where there's no more of a project management consideration, at each stage of these of the project cycle, how are you integrating these considerations? And that work was done with UNDP under the aegis of the Spotlight Initiative, which was the global initiative gender-based violence. And what I should also mention is that we also develop a training program, and we have both online self-paced training in the guidelines, but also we did some facilitator-led sessions online around the guidelines. And in terms of strategies that are working when it comes to capacity building, because that tends to be my field, one strategy I would like to highlight is some of our facilitators were persons who had actual experiences over the course of their lives with family violence, gender-based violence. And having a facilitator, or engaging with persons who have had the actual experience sort of takes it from that academic discussion now into being able to better understand. Because if you haven't experienced it, it can be sometimes challenging to actually understand what people go through.
And also I think it's great recognizing that some of the people involved in disaster risk management preparedness aren't necessarily gender specialists, right? So we really have to start with helping them understand the impacts, the risks, and it sounds like a great resource that we could share beyond the Caribbean. So thank you for sharing that. Unfortunately, I have to end the panel. I could talk to you guys for another hour. You have such rich experiences. We also had someone from UN Women that wanted to join us but couldn't be here today, and she sent us a short video. Her name is Tony Ann Broadburr, representative of the UN Women Multi-Country Office in the Caribbean. So we're going to show a short message from her, and then we'll close the session. But it was wonderful speaking to you all. Thank you so much.
Office in the Caribbean. I wish I were able to be with you today in Japan, but unfortunately, that is not the reality. But fortunately, I can still share some of our experiences living at the intersection of gender-based violence and climate change. Quite frankly, anything that we do at the MCO Caribbean has to be climate resilience, or else it would not be sustainable. We've been working for years on strengthening the police and the judiciary to better deal with the different forms of gender-based violence that are experienced in the Caribbean. One of the key forms experienced in the Caribbean is intimate partner violence. For the countries that have prevalence data, we know that any woman that's been in a relationship over the course of a lifetime, 46% of those women have experienced some form of intimate partner violence. So we've been working very closely with the judiciary and the police to better, one, manage the cases that come before them, and two, support the broader government and civil society with a prevention approach. What we found is that when this intersects with natural or man-made hazards, and the aftermath of them, there's a break because there's sometimes silos between disaster management and domestic violence case management. So we have found in one case, a perpetrator or someone had a protection order issued against him in the same shelter with the person with whom he had the protection order against. What this meant, luckily, this perpetrator told the shelter manager that this was the case, and he was immediately moved. We have been working then, since then, with the shelter managers, the police, and the judiciary to ensure that one, the records that were paper records become digitized so they don't get lost in the aftermath of a storm. Two, that there is seamless sharing of information with data privacy at its center to ensure that both perpetrators or alleged perpetrators and survivors get the kind of shelter that they need in the aftermath of a storm. We've also been working quite closely with our colleagues at IOM to ensure that shelter managers get the training that they need to recognize the two other forms of gender-based violence that are most prevalent in the aftermath of a hazard: sexual exploitation and abuse and child sexual abuse. Ensuring that key shelter managers understand how best to manage these cases and the referral pathway has been key to ensuring protection of those who can be most vulnerable during these times. There's some countries like Antigua and Barbuda that developed one-stop centers, and these one-stop centers had business continuity plans that allowed them to ensure success when there was also a hazard occurring. This model is being copied in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in St. Lucia, and across the broader Caribbean space. Thank you, and I hope we'll be able to have more of an opportunity to share.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I really want to thank our panelists and, of course, Tony, who couldn't be here today with us. And I do believe we need to wrap it up, but what I did want to do was to leave you with the report that we had mentioned at the outset in case you're interested to read more. It's the Violence Against Women and Girls Guide, focusing on all phases of disaster risk management. And then also we're launching today, actually it's the QR code below, is the new e-learning that we've developed. I don't know if you guys can hear me. It's the new e-learning that we've developed and launched as of today on the World Bank's online learning center platform. So it's a self-paced learning course that you can take on gender-based violence prevention and disasters. So we hope you will take a look, check it out, take the course. And continue working on this important topic. So we really thank you all, and especially our panelists, for being with us today. And it's just the start, right? So now the idea is to take these ideas forward and raise awareness and implement what you can in your own cities and countries. So thanks again. We appreciate it. Thank you.